Today on Decoding Davos, we speak to a couple of experts about what we can learn and take away from World Economic Forum Davos 2017. So Lesiba, thanks for joining us. Davos 2017, many themes: globalization, the unequalness of globalization, protectionism as a threat to globalization. Amongst all of these messages, what are some of the key takeaways for you?
You do make a good point. A lot of stuff was talked about, but I think the main aim of Davos is basically trying to solve problems of the world. And I think one of the problems is global growth, because if you have growth everywhere, I think you generally have a happy world, so to say. So I think one of the key things that came out of Davos is the commitment by world leaders to globalization. And I mean, if you look at opening speech by the Chinese president, we've also had affirmation of that from our own sub-governor Lesiba Ledwaba in one of the interviews. And I think George Soros also made a good point about how important globalization is, because globalization is one of the key drivers to having sustainable and economic growth globally.
But is that not veiled protectionism and self-interest in, driving the agenda of globalization?
So I think although globalization is good, I think one of the negative criticisms of globalization is the fact that it hasn't really been inclusive. So a lot of people really feel left out, although the globe is growing. So I think in the current format, I think a point that was noted there is that it's not really relevant. Global leaders have to go back to the drawing board and become more responsible and make sure that global growth basically benefits a lot of people. And the fact that in the past, it hasn't really benefited everybody. It's basically led to the rise of, for example, protectionism, which is a result of nationalism. I mean, if you just look at results, we saw Brexit vote results, as well as US Trump election victory. I think, and I mean, protectionism on its own is a big threat to globalization or world growth, so to say.
So we live in a global world, but in South Africa we have a need for inclusive growth. We have a need for policy clarity to create a favorable environment for investment and for where we put our money. How do you think Team South Africa fared at Davos 2017?
I think Team South Africa did very well. I think the Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan, plays a very important role, and he's very highly regarded within the finance circles. And I think the message they try to relay to the rest of the world is we are open for business. South Africa is very much pro global trade.
What would you say to someone that says, like me as an investor, I'm not really interested in Davos. It doesn't make a difference about where I put my money and how I construct my portfolio. It needs to be diversified. You're wasting plane tickets and going to stand in the snow unnecessarily.
Yeah. Well, I think there has been criticisms of Davos. I think the biggest criticism is it's not really inclusive, but more exclusive. Going forward, I would like to see a more diverse representation. And if you look at Davos on the good side, it's actually a global platform where there is ongoing debates on how to solve the world's problems. I think that's important.
Davos is over. Donald Trump is the US president. How do we come back to South Africa and construct a strategy for 2017 and going forward?
There's a World Economic Forum conference coming through in Durban later on this year. I think Africa has to come together, look at our own set of problems, and try to resolve those as Africa, more focused. Because in a global context, a lot of those conversations can be lost, for example. And another thing to think of is also maybe South Africa specifically have its own economic forums relating to its own specific problems, where you'll invite your academics, corporates, for example, as well as politicians, and again, the average man on the street is important.
Lesiba, all the best for 2017.
Thanks a lot.